The USS Nautilus was the first nuclear-powered submarine ever built, developed by the American Navy. The Nautilus became one of the most successful submarines at the time, and the Navy realized what they had in stock for the future of their naval submarine engineering. However, the Nautilus was an accomplishment that had required much time and planning for it to actually become a beneficial tool of the military. Philip Albelson and Ross Gunn both drew out the construction plans for the submarine. Admiral Rickover, a four-star admiral and leader of the naval nuclear reactors, was nicknamed Father of the Nuclear Navy for his influential contribution. In July of 1951, Congress authorized the construction of the Nautilus. After about a year, President Harry S. Truman laid the keel of the submarine at the Electric Boat Shipyard in Groton, Connecticut on June 14, 1952. This marked the approaching completion of the submarine itself. It took only 18 months for the Nautilus to be fully constructed. It would become the sixth ship in the Navy fleet to be called Nautilus. Nautilus was a very large boat for the time. She was 98 meters long and displaced 4,092 tons of water when submerged with a crew of 104 sailors. However, the Nautilus became very well known for its distance and speed records, which were absolutely outstanding compared to all other diesel-powered submarine records before her. Powered by a S-2W reactor, submarine Model 2 Westinghouse, a pressurized water reactor, she could go a top speed of about 22 knots on the surface and 23 knots while submerged. After nearly 18 months of construction, the Nautilus was ready to take out to the seas. It was launched on January 21, 1954. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower marked this commemorative moment by breaking a bottle of champagne on the Nautilus's bow. 8 months passed, and on September 30th, 1954, Nautilus became the first commissioned nuclear-powered ship in the American Navy. The commanding officer of the Nautilus, Commander Eugene P. Wilkinson, ordered that all communication lines be shut down and spoke the memorable phrase, "Underway on nuclear power." The Nautilus traveled all around the oceans for many years, participating in many various exercises. One of the biggest journeys the Nautilus had to undergo was the so-called Operation Sunshine, declared by the American Navy officials. This journey brought much fame and notoriety to the USS Nautilus. Their plan was to show the Soviet Union that America could also have a technological advancement of their own. The Soviet Union had successfully launched their satellite Sputnik into space on October 4, 1957, and after America's horrible attempt on launching Vanguard 1 soon after, they turned to the Nautilus for an opportunity to redeem themselves from their previous failure. After President Eisenhower was aware of Nautilus nearly reaching the North Pole in September 1957, having been informed of his Navy aide, Captain Evan Peter Orand spoke with the commander of the Nautilus, Captain William R. Anderson, in late 1957. He wanted Captain Anderson to inform the White House staff on the details of the submarine's journey under the ice.
Operation Sunshine caught the attention of White House Press Secretary Jim Hagerty. Hagerty wanted something that could re-establish America's lead over the Soviet Union. He asked himself whether if it would be possible for the Nautilus to travel through the Arctic from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. Commander Anderson found that it would be very likely this mission could succeed if the Nautilus was given more equipment, such as a more advanced compass navigation system. Captain Orand and Hagerty were pleased with the idea, and they informed President Eisenhower about it. The President gave his consent and told Captain Orand to go consult Admiral Burke. Admiral Burke was the chief of naval operations working for President Eisenhower. Burke, however, insisted on training a special group of Navy soldiers for the mission and to have them undergo the operations themselves as opposed to allowing the Nautilus crew to undergo the special mission themselves. This group concluded that the mission should be executed soon, and Captain Arend suggested to President Eisenhower that the Nautilus should attempt the operation in the summer of 1958. This was agreed upon, and the Nautilus was underway on the mission a few months later. The Nautilus first attempted to complete Operation Sunshine on June 9, 1958, where it departed from Seattle, Washington, and made its way towards the cold icy waters of the Arctic polar cap. Commander Anderson told the crew that they were headed back home and would be going through the Arctic cap to reach it. This took the crew by surprise, but they went along with it, as they saw how serious Anderson really was. The Nautilus did encounter problems with a mass amount of ice which was located above and below them, so they conducted themselves very slowly and carefully. Despite his unwillingness to turn back, Anderson was forced to turn around and head off course to avoid any serious damage to the submarine itself. Despite the hopes of many, the Nautilus had failed to successfully travel underneath the North Pole. However, this did not stop the Nautilus from attempting the mission a second time. The Nautilus departed from Pearl Harbor on July 23, 1958. Months went by as the Nautilus headed for its goal, 90 degrees north. It was not until August 3, 1958, that the Nautilus had successfully traveled beneath layers of ice and had arrived to its destination. What had previously been deemed impossible had now been done by the Nautilus, which had 116 men stationed on it at the time. After transmitting to the world a famous message, Nautilus 90 degrees north, the sub continued on its path and turned southeast on a course to Greenland. She arrived there 2 days later and surfaced for the first time after many months. Although the mission had been successfully accomplished, there had been previous precautions for an emergency if the submarine became trapped under shallow pieces of ice. Captain Anderson's most extreme escape plan would have been to use torpedoes to break the ice into pieces, thus allowing the Nautilus to surface if necessary.
Operation Sunshine was the most influential objective that the USS Nautilus accomplished. Despite its journey through the North Pole, Nautilus broke many speed and distance records by easily beating all the previous ones that had been set by slower submarines. It was only a matter of time, however, till the Soviet Union would develop their first nuclear submarine, the K-3. The K-3 surfaced at the North Pole, which weakened the United States' strategic advantage in the Arctic thereafter. Captain Anderson went on to run as a congressman for District 6 of Tennessee. He won and was re-elected 3 times. As for the Nautilus, it continued to operate for many years in the U.S. Navy. In May 1959, Nautilus was taken to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard so that it could be given a complete overhaul of its reactor's fuel rods. Her overhaul was complete the year later in August of 1960. Over the next 20 years, Nautilus would be used for tests and developmental research projects. By that time, it was already one of the many nuclear submarines in the U.S. Navy. In spring of 1979, Nautilus began a course towards the location of her launch, Groton, Connecticut. She was decommissioned on March 3, 1980. This marked the end of her remarkable career. Nautilus was then brought to the Submarine Force Museum on April 11, 1986. It has remained there ever since.